Hey everybody, it's Margaret. Thank you again for joining me. I'm continuing with my fibroid series, and this is video number 5. And today I'm going to talk about how my fibroid brought me to ancestral healing and how it was in the process of my death and dying phase through the dark night of the soul in 2016. And it led me to Mount Shasta and a procedure that I had at the Mayo Clinic for my fibroids in 2017. So in the last video, I ended my story where there was a lot of stress in my life. The fibroids were growing. I went to a herbalist and I joined the Changing Woman Sisterhood. During that time, the herbs were working. And I went into the sisterhood and I began to heal parts of myself that I didn't really know that I needed to heal. I was beginning to start looking at my past and looking at some of my fears and patterns and behaviors that I had that led me to all of this stress in my life and all of these challenges. I began to recognize that a lot of these wounds were ancestral wounds from my lineage and having to look at that. Every woman has wounds that are passed down from generation to generation. And I was looking at that because I wanted something different for my daughter, and I had to break those chains. And when I'm talking about looking at my past and childhood and breaking chains, it is not to blame my parents or my mother for anything that she did wrong. I used to blame her and be angry for most of my young adulthood and adulthood. And I look at it now that I'm out of this dark night of the soul, and now that I'm able to see this with so much more light and awareness, is that's what I called into this life. I called in these people so that they can play a role so that I can evolve and grow. And I know it's really hard for some of you to hear that. For when I first heard that you would see, these ancestral wounds as blessings and all of these patterns that are dysfunctional as blessings for you to grow, I thought this woman was absolutely crazy and wanted to tell her to fuck off because I just didn't want anything to do with that. But now, after years and years of processing this, I can see this from the outside as an observer, as it was the perfect storm to allow me to get to that place of anger and illness and challenges and stress and chaos so that I can move through that, so that I can grow and evolve. So that's what my belief is, and that's what I see is true for myself. So I believe that I called in this lifetime these experiences so that I can grow. And what they taught me is I needed to create boundaries. I felt like I was an open book, and you can just, people could take whatever they wanted from me. I had no power. I had no boundaries. I was just, my life force was leaving. And when a mentor of mine had asked me, who am I bleeding for? Why am I bleeding so much? Did you ever look at who you're bleeding for? I thought she was crazy too. And after several weeks of contemplating on who am I bleeding for, is I had been giving so much of my life away, constantly doing for others and nurturing others, taking care of others, that it was starting to take my life force, which is my blood, away. And I just kept bleeding and bleeding. And I was bleeding for many, many people. And so when I got that was a huge wake-up call too, and just part of my healing. So doing this kind of work is very difficult for those that have gone through it or beginning it or in the middle of it. It seems like there's no light at the end of the tunnel. It was really straining on my relationships and to create boundaries so that I can have more energy for myself to process it, because it was really, really exhausting. There's the way the brain has to really shift and reboot itself into this new way of thinking is very, very exhausting. It is this huge energy shift within the body. And so I remember going away for maybe one night or 2 nights, once or twice that year, just so I can remove myself. I would go up to northern Michigan and just immerse myself into the trees, into the Mother Earth, and to really process this, just to be alone and just really take care of myself. And through that, I just came back with so much, the processing went faster, and I remember that I had more love and compassion for myself so that I can continue to do this really hard work. So that was really leading me into 2016, which was literally the year of death for me. The death grandmother sat really right here, right next to me, and really was there, me experiencing death over death over death over death, over and over and over again. There was so much death going on. That's when I really started to descend into the dark night of the soul. In 2016, my father was still sick and was taking a turn for the worse. I had to identify, I did identify what was codependency and how it was intermingled in all of the relationships that I've had. And I will write in the details some books on codependency. And I did a lot of work, I did a lot of reading to really understand codependency and be able to break those roles and break those chains. I believe it's a lot of work of Generation X, a lot of my peers. There's a lot of codependency in very traditional families, religious families, culturally strong families, alcoholics or any kind of substance abuse. There's always some kind of codependency, and this is not from me, but from the readings but I came from a very codependent family where there's lots of roles, there's lots of games that people play with each other in these roles, and I continued it in my marriage and with my children. So I had to really break those patterns. I didn't have to, but I did, and because I wanted something better. I was just too exhausted and sick to continue to play this game. So I began to pull away from my parents, just so I can process and take care of myself for the first time. I had to look at my marriage and all of the codependency that we both played with each other, because we both came from very codependent families and was continuing that. So luckily I had a partner, my husband, that really wanted to look at that and to work on it. So we were able to do that together and create a lot of boundaries I had to create a lot of boundaries for myself in that relationship. I had friends, two of them that moved away, that was just breaking my heart. My dad was dying, and that was really difficult. In 2016, a lot of celebrities died, so a lot of MTV video stars that were part of my childhood or early adolescence started to die, including like George Michael and David Bowie and just some other great artists. So that was just like another part of the grieving process. And I felt like there was so much grief and so much death going on. I mean, I can go on and on, but those were kind of the big ones that I felt like I couldn't grasp onto anything. My life was just totally spinning out of control. I didn't recognize my life anymore. There was so much loss. And I got very, very sad, very, very depressed. I remember wearing a lot of black. I remember wearing snow pants inside because I was just so cold. Like my body was just shutting down, just trying to process and rewire everything that was going on. And then it seems like when I would come up for air, another death would happen, and then I would just go spiraling down again. And I did a lot of crying that year. It was very, very difficult. And so, but the lessons were consistent about death. And at this time, I was not taking my herbs. I was not seeing a herbalist. I was going back to comfort eating, which was lots of cookies and sweets. And I just felt like I was just spiraling down out of control. And sitting with the death grandmother through this year, it really taught me a lot. It taught me that there can't be really a rebirth with death, and to really trust the process of death, because they're really on the same cusp, for there can't be rebirth without the death, and to be friends with death, and to really just ride the wave of the grief. And And for me, I know that there was a lot of patterns and a lot of fear around death. I had an experience when I was 10 when I lost my grandfather. It was very traumatic. And so I feel now I'm looking back at that time, I was very fearful of death. And so this 2016 really had me look at it right face to face. So also during 2016, I started to hear Mount Shasta over and over again. It's a sacred mountain. I had no idea where it was on the planet, and I heard it over a couple, like maybe 4 or 5 times over a couple weeks, and I knew when I hear stuff like that that there's something for me to do. So I found out it's actually in California, and then I booked a trip out that way for a week, and that had been the longest time that I've ever been away from my family. And my dad was very, very sick at this time, and I was very weak, and I was really just trying to battle, just trying to breathe and process all of the grief that had happened in that year. So I went to the Sacred Mountain. I had some amazing healing over there, and it was just it's just a beautiful mountain if you ever get to go there. It's full of magic. It was easy for me to meditate and go into journey, and I feel like the mountain had given me a way to remember my light. I just remember sitting with the tree and just filling myself up with light, and knowing that it was always there. I just keep going. You're full of light, and you're made of light, just to keep going on and on. So when I left there, I knew that my father was going to die. I just knew it, and I was going to honor him for the next month as much as I could, but was very, very difficult to see him deteriorate. So that was September, and he passed away at the end of October, and that was probably the biggest loss that I had at that ever. That was a huge loss, and I wasn't really ready to trust the process of letting him go. But I know now, after 3 years of grieving and letting go, that he is on the other side as my biggest guide. He's teaching me so much more, and I feel like the learning with him by my side has been just on fast speed. And so I couldn't have had what I have now without letting him go in the physical body, which is still, I cry and miss his face so much. But it is amazing when you can see it, when you just step away from your life and just kind of be this observer, how the death and rebirth process, there is a rebirth and there is a newness if you clear out that death. So when I was in Mount Shasta, I began to feel my fibroid protruding outside of my belly, and I knew that this was for real, that with all the stress that had been going on, just grieving and just really just gasping for air, and all the energy going into just the processing, that this fibroid just blew up. And I could feel it. My abdomen, my lower abdomen was very, very hard, like I had a beginning of a pregnancy, and it was for real that I needed to do something about this. But my father was dying. He passed in October, and then of January of 2017 is when I was starting to get MRIs and deciding of what I needed to do. I knew that I needed to jump through the fear and do something medically, procedure, surgery, something to help with this tumor that's protruding out of my belly. So this is becoming a really long video, and I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to continue in the next video about Accessa and my experience with the Mayo Clinic to help the fibroid and all of the learning and growth that had happened through that. So stay tuned to video 6, the next video. I will see you there. Again, thank you for all of your love and your support. I enjoy the storytelling. It has been healing me on so many levels. If you like the video, please like it. And if you like this channel, please subscribe and leave a comment wherever you can so that we can continue to heal and share and heal each other. So thank you. Take care.